My name is Maren Ellison, 37 years old. I was 17 the last time I stood in that doorway. The duffel was already in the trunk when my mother said it. She didn't raise her voice, didn't tremble, didn't blink. She looked at me the way you look at a stain you can't scrub out. You're dead to this family. Don't come back without success. Then she turned and shut the door. I tried my key anyway. The lock turned to air. By nightfall, they'd changed them all. I wasn't high, failing out, or stealing. I was inconvenient. Lucia, my older sister, had just landed a city job and her boyfriend was moving in. They needed my room. Simple math if you were willing to count me as zero. They dressed it up as tough love. Go become somebody. This will make you stronger. One day you'll thank us. What they meant was Lucia's glow was finally bright enough to make me disappear. I stood in the driveway with a folder of community college enrollment papers and realized I didn't have a home, just a bag of clothes and a lesson in rankings. I took a bus to Cincinnati the same week. My mother's cousin and her husband said I could have a corner of their basement for a few months. They didn't know what to do with me, but at least they didn't call me family on a Tuesday and take away the word by Thursday. I stocked shelves at a gas station. I ran a register. I kept the night shift because it made the days long enough to stack two together and call it momentum. I finished school in pieces. At 24, in an adult EAT accounting class, I met Daniel. Quiet smile, ridiculous patience, a man who could fix a hinge and keep a promise. We didn't rush anything, which is probably why it worked. I didn't call home, not once. I heard the headlines secondhand. Lucia married the boyfriend, then bought a house with a pool, then traded up for leather seats that remembered her spine. Dad bragged at block parties about how his eldest made the family proud. If I existed at all, I was a footnote, a cautionary tale they'd misremember on purpose. My kids, if I had any then, would have known only Daniel's folks as grandparents. I decided some things rot faster when you keep digging. 20 years passed and the silence stayed obedient. Then last week, a number I didn't recognize lit my phone. I let it die to voicemail. After dinner, I pressed play. Maren, I don't know if you'll even listen, but we need to talk. Please, it's important. Please call me back. It was my mother's voice, thinner and hoarse, like her throat had been sandpapered. I didn't call back that night, or the next. Curiosity is an animal with good teeth. On the third day, I searched their address. Foreclosure. Auction pending. Before I could decide how that felt, my phone rang again. The voice on the line was a sparrow I hadn't heard since high school, frantic and proud at the same time. Lucia. Maren, thank God. I've been trying to reach you. She talked fast enough to fog glass. It's not what it looks like. Our accounts are frozen. Government overreach. We're victims of a scheme. The IRS, the bank. None of them understand how this happened. We need your help. It was almost funny how efficiently the word we could make a door look like a mirror. 20 years gone, and I'd become useful again. I agreed to meet them the next morning. Not because I missed them. Not because the phrase, dead to this family, had faded into something harmless. I wanted to see the shape of it. Collapse has a geometry. I wanted to know who built it. The motel off Route 38 could have been any motel off Route 38. Weekly rates taped to the bulletproof glass. A vending machine promising chips it would never deliver. I knocked. The pause was long enough to wish I'd leave. Then the door opened. My mother looked smaller, like the years had been siphoned out of her. She glanced at my face and then away, as if my eyes were a switch she couldn't afford to bump. She stepped aside. The room smelled like damp carpet and reheated noodles. My father sat on the bed among stacks of legal paper, riffling through pages the way you might look for an ending that's kinder than the one you got. Lucia paced in a hoodie expensive enough to be evidence. In the bathroom doorway, her husband argued with a lawyer on speaker about frozen accounts. Nobody said hello. Nobody asked about Daniel, about my life, whether I slept well these last 2 decades. We got straight to the ask. Here was the story. Lucia started with consulting, then portfolio advising, then a fund. Somewhere between those nouns and the next, it turned into a Ponzi. People lost money. A lot. When the walls began to lean, Lucia used my parents' names, credit, the house. The paperwork had their signatures like a trail of fingerprints across a crime scene. The government had already wrapped the house in yellow tape you couldn't see, and court was in 2 days. They needed a miracle that could be wired before lunch. I listened. I nodded. I asked gentle questions. the way you do when someone has practiced their lie and you want to see which lines still need rehearsal. Responsibility passed around the room like a hot pan. Lucia said she was misled. My father said banks are predatory. My mother stared at the carpet as if it might open and show her a version of herself from before the math went wrong. I'll think about it, I said, and I left. My mother followed me into the gray light of the parking lot. She said my name like it was a thing you could drop and break. Do you remember the spare key under the flower pot? She asked. Of course I did. They left it there long after they changed the locks, as if memory counted as mercy. The next morning I sat in the back of the courtroom. I didn't say my name. I didn't blink when they looked around for someone to pity them. The judge was careful and direct. The paper trail did not stutter. The eviction order came clean. 7 days to vacate. My mother cried without sound, the way grief sometimes respects the geometry of public rooms. My father looked older than mourning. Lucia looked bored, like she could still bargain with gravity. I slipped out before they saw me and made 2 calls, one to a lawyer I trust, one to a financial advisor who owes me the truth. What would it take, I asked, to stop the bleeding, get them out, into a rental, clear enough space they can breathe? $30,000, maybe a little more. I wired $30,000 the next morning in a way that let the money do the talking and my name whisper. No note, no heroics, just routing numbers that pointed to clean exits. 2 hours later, my phone blinked Mom. I didn't answer. The voicemail lives in my phone like a pressed flower, her voice frayed thin, whispering that they didn't deserve it, that she was sorry, that she wished she'd done everything differently. I played it once, then again. The second time, my heart didn't twist. It made a small, clinical shape and held. Was it the right call? Daniel asked that night as we loaded dishes. It was the last one, I said. He didn't say Jenna's name, didn't bring up how she'd told his cousins I was cold at family holidays when I kept my past off the table. He just handed me a towel, waited while I dried the pan, and kissed my temple the way he does when he wants me to know we're on the same side. 3 days later, Lucia texted, "No thank you, just an address and a thumbs-up emoji. A squat rental at the edge of town." Somehow the little icon made me angrier than the motel. I told myself that meant it was over. The money bought a door I could close again. It wasn't. But the next chapter didn't arrive like a storm. It showed up in a cardboard box, carried by the woman who once told me I was dead. "Found some of your old things," my mother said, standing on my porch like a Jehovah's Witness for regret. "Thought you might want them." She didn't ask to come in. She put the box down gently, like it might explode, and left. I didn't open it until the house was quiet. At first it was pure nostalgia. 3rd grade glove, a sketchbook that made me wince, a syllabus I'd underlined like faith. Near the bottom, between the pages of a high school planner that still smelled like cheap ink, lay printouts of an email chain. Lucia to Brent Warner. Land transfers. Dummy Corps. Hidden liabilities. 2 years before the indictment. A reply from my father. "Looks good to me. As long as the house is protected, I don't care whose name is on the papers." They knew. A geometry again. It laid itself across the table and left no room for doubt. I stared at the pages, at the ceiling, at the life Daniel and I built by refusing to borrow anyone else's weather. I should have felt rage. What I felt was colder and clearer. I had paid for their exit. They had practiced their lie. And I wasn't done learning what that cost. The morning after the emails flattened the air in our kitchen, I told myself I'd do one sensible, finite thing. Drive past the rental and confirm they were, at the very least, housed. No conversations, no lectures, just a look and then home. From the corner, the little duplex looked like a place meant to be temporary. Paint the color of a shrug, a porch light with a flicker, blinds that didn't quite meet in the middle. But it wasn't the house that stopped me. It was the car in the driveway, a black BMW, the paint so new it reflected the power lines like they'd been drawn for it. People who've just been evicted don't park that kind of shine in front of a rental with a dead lawn. I slid lower in my seat and watched. A woman I didn't recognize came out carrying 2 brown paper bags like a lifestyle ad. Fresh blowout, athleisure you don't sweat in, sunglasses wider than her face. She set the bags on the hood, laughing at something behind her, and then Lucia stepped into view. Clean hoodie, clean sneakers, clean conscience on loan. They kiss the way people kiss when their lives are storyboards and every frame confirms a lie. No, She handed Lucia a bag, and they disappeared inside. Not his wife, someone else, someone new, someone probably very impressed by a man who can land on his feet without ever showing you whose back he used to jump higher. I didn't get out. I didn't make a scene. I did what I do best. Filed the image where it would be sharp when I needed it, then put the car in gear and drifted away. He left 20 minutes later, alone, in the BMW. I tailed him just far enough to see the gate lift, as if it remembered his license plate personally. Inside, fountains, palms that had never seen a storm, a valet stand that would smile at your worst decisions. I drove past slow. Upscale apartments. He wasn't sleeping on the rental's thin carpet. My parents were. He had a new address, a new girlfriend, and my old money softening the landing. It took 2 days for the drip to begin. Could you help with groceries? The rental didn't come with a fridge. We're using a cooler. Mom, 9:14 a.m. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred, then put the phone face down and made coffee. At 3:02 p.m., Dad. Gas company says service ends Friday unless we pay the deposit. Just this once, until Lucia gets things sorted. I waited. The next morning, Mom again, and this time she had a photo, an overdue medical bill, circled in pink like an apology. Not asking for me, just letting you know, in case you wanted to help. I called her because silence in the face of that kind of staging feels like complicity. I wired you $30,000, I said, keeping my voice in the lane that doesn't make anyone swerve. Get your bearings. That's what it was for. I'm not your bank. She didn't argue. She said okay in the voice of someone who has already practiced making you feel unkind. I hung up and rested my forehead against the cupboard. The cool wood felt like a lifeline. That night, Lucia called. I think we should clear the air, she said, as if oxygen were a resource she could sell me back. Things got messy. I moved out because the stress was affecting my marriage. My wife needed space. I saw you, I said, at the rental, with someone else. Silence, the kind you can hear undoing itself. Then a soft laugh, appreciative, like I'd shown her a magic trick. You always were good at digging, Marin. The line went dead. For someone who allegedly needed help, she hung up a lot. I told Daniel everything that night. The emails, the car, the woman, my parents' texts, the exact words in my mother's voicemail. He leaned against the counter, arms folded, listening like a person who understands that half of love is witness. When I finished, he asked exactly one thing. Are you done? Yes, I said. It felt like putting a rock down. Good, he said. He didn't say Jenna's name. Neither did I. I didn't need to revisit the way she used to click her tongue at holidays and tell his aunt I was so controlled, like restraint was a flaw. Daniel rinsed his glass and set it on the rack. They don't get any more of you, he added softly, as if finishing a sentence I hadn't known I was writing. For a week, the text slowed. Then my mother switched strategies. She opened Facebook. I don't log in much. Peace tastes better when you don't sip it through a scroll. But the notifications piled until curiosity knocked. There it was, a long, public post in that voice people use when they want to tell their side without naming their villain. Betrayal. Blood. Some people turning their backs on their family. A son in her version, not a daughter, but the outline of me was right there, a chalk drawing with no body needed. The comments read like a chorus of pity. Old church friends telling her to stay strong. Distant cousins I haven't seen since '03 offering prayers. A woman with a floral profile picture wrote, "Can't believe Marin would do this. Family is forever." I closed the laptop. The house was quiet, dishwater cooling in the sink. When I opened the computer again 3 days later, my cousin Greg had messaged a screenshot with one line. You seeing this crap? Yeah, I'd seen it. I'd seen enough. I waited 2 days on purpose, took the kids hiking, listened to my daughter try to rescue every ladybug from a log like she'd sworn an oath. Watched my son finally fix the scooter he'd been breaking in new ways all month, the weld holding because he'd learned to sit with it long enough for the metal to tell him when to stop. Sunday night, Daniel made chili and we ate it too hot, laughing over something that didn't matter. Normal, quiet hours. On Monday morning, I packed the box my mother had delivered, the glove, the sketchbook, the syllabus, back up and drove it to the donation center. I kept the email chain. That was the only thing that belonged to my future. Everything else belonged to the past. The past needed to travel lighter. On Tuesday, I deleted their numbers and set a filter. Anything with our last name went straight to trash. It felt like cleaning a wound. They showed up at my office on Thursday. There's a particular tilt to the world when you see your parents through plate glass after 20 years, like a photograph of people who look like you, except for the part that never did. I caught them before they could talk to reception. We stood in the parking lot under a sky that couldn't be bothered to attend. "We're not doing this here," I said. "You need to leave." My father held an envelope like it might make him formal. "You can't just walk away from blood," he started. "I already did," I said, "with $30,000. That was the last conversation." He flinched. My mother opened her mouth to try the line she'd used online, the one about family being forever. "It is," I said before she could, "until you make it temporary." They left. My hands shook for a long time after, not because I was scared, but because endings have weight, and my arms were tired from setting things down gently. A week of quiet went by. Then HR emailed me a recording, an anonymous voicemail, claiming I was funneling company money to my relatives. It was sloppy work, no details, voice disguised badly. My boss sent it with a single line. "You might want to handle this." I typed back, "Records are available whenever you want them." He replied, "Don't need them. We're fine." He knew me better than my family ever tried to. That should have been the end. It wasn't. The letter arrived in the mail like a prop from a different century. No return address, my name spelled Marin with 2 N's, as if even the envelope couldn't decide who I was. Inside, 1 line, typed. "You may want to know what's coming. Ask your sister." I wasn't afraid. But curiosity is an old tenant. She doesn't knock. I called Greg, the only relative who ever chooses the truth even when it's expensive. He sighed before I finished the first sentence. "You're going to love this," he said, grief and humor braided together. "Lucia launched a new company, not under her name, close enough to yours to make a banker squint and move on. Marin Holdings, LLC. Delaware, fake address. She's testing business credit lines. Small limits for now. Enough to land in your lap if the wind changes." My chest went cold and then calm, the way a room feels when you turn the lights on and see exactly where the broken glass is. I hung up and called my lawyer. We did the drill. Freezes, fraud alerts, letters to bureaus, notices to banks. Counsel looped on every step. I pulled public records until my eyes blurred and flagged every LLC with a name too near my own. Then I did one thing I hadn't done in 20 years. I opened Facebook and wrote exactly one post. I gave my family $30,000 to stabilize them after a fraud case they were involved in. They used it to lie, manipulate, and then began applying for credit using a near version of my identity. I won't be helping them again. If you think that's cruel, feel free to unfollow. I'm at peace. They are not my problem. The fallout arrived quickly and softly. A few people clutched pearls in the comments. A few tried the old line, "This is between family," as if the courts haven't always been part of family business. Then private messages trickled in. "I'm sorry, I didn't know. She pitched me a family fund last month. Thank you for saying it out loud." That night, Mom called. I didn't answer. The voicemail began with the wrong lesson. "You've made your point. People are turning against us. Just stop." I deleted it before it could get clever. The next morning, I was on the porch with coffee when Daniel stepped out in his socks, phone in hand. "You should see this," he said, and passed it to me. Lucia. Trending. Not because of me. Because someone in Arizona pressed charges. A woman with 6 figures missing. The mugshot came from an airport. The chin tilted the way people tilt when they're still thinking about how to sell the next version of the story. The article had names, dates, the name of a fake company that looked like a high schooler's idea of legitimacy. I didn't smile because she got caught. I smiled because it finally had nothing to do with me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying the cleanup rag. The house was quiet. The phone stayed still. The world turned without asking me to resuscitate it. For the first few days after the news broke, the world around me felt eerily calm, like a room after thunder has left, but before you're sure it's really gone. The phone stopped. The messages stopped. Even the familiar ache of vigilance inside my chest began to ease, slowly, like an overworked muscle remembering it could rest. The mugshot made the rounds faster than gossip ever could. There was no mistaking her. Lucia Ellison, the consultant, now headlined as alleged multi-state fraudster. Arrested at Phoenix Airport. The story ran with a montage of her Instagram photos, the champagne toasts, the penthouse selfies, the motivational captions that now read like punchlines. I didn't forward it to anyone. I didn't need to. By noon, the text came in anyway. Greg, guess karma keeps receipts? My mother, you must be happy now. Are you proud of yourself? And then a final one from my father. Your sister needs help. You can still fix this. I stared at that line for a long moment. Fix this. The phrase sounded like a reflex, a family tradition passed down like an heirloom. For decades, I was the one who fixed things. Grades, bills, moods, messes I didn't make. Now they were standing in the ruins and still pointing to me, the only one not holding a match. I typed one sentence back. I already did. You just kept breaking it. Then I blocked them both. For the next week, life looked unremarkable in a way that felt almost holy. I went to work. I cooked dinner. I slept through the night without waiting for the phone to light up. The world had gone back to its proper proportions. One evening, Daniel and I sat on the back porch, watching the light fade over the fence. He was sanding an old chair we'd rescued from a thrift shop, methodical and quiet, the air between us warm and easy. Do you regret any of it? He asked finally. No, I said, and I meant it. But I wish I'd learned sooner that forgiveness doesn't mean access. He nodded. That's a line you should teach the kids one day. I already have, I said, smiling. The porch light clicked on by itself, chasing the dark back a few feet. The simple automation of it made me laugh. Even the house has boundaries, I said. Daniel grinned. You programmed it. Exactly. A week later, a thin white envelope appeared in the mail. No return address again. Inside, 2 things. A clipped news article and a check. The article was short, just 3 paragraphs about Lucia's bail hearing. Denied. Flight risk. The check was stranger. $1,000 drawn from an account in her name. Memo line, debt paid. I almost admired the audacity. Even in a jumpsuit, she couldn't resist one last transaction. I slipped both into a folder labeled, "For the record," and filed it with the rest. The following Sunday, I drove out to the park with Daniel. It was the same one where we used to walk when money was thin and dreams were measured in quiet promises. The air smelled like spring pretending to arrive early. Children shouted somewhere in the distance, the sound rising and falling like waves. I didn't talk about my family. I didn't need to. Every step away from them was already a sentence in the story I'd finally rewritten. At the edge of the trail, I saw a woman about my age sitting on a bench, scrolling her phone with the kind of glazed panic that says somebody just betrayed me. Her eyes were red. Her posture was familiar, half collapse, half defense. I caught her glance by accident. She smiled apologetically. Sorry, she said, just dealing with something. I almost told her, me too, but instead I said, it gets quieter. She frowned, confused. What does? The part that hurts, I said, eventually. I kept walking before she could ask what I meant. 2 months passed without a single word from anyone with my last name. When I checked the mail now, it was just bills, letters from clients, the normal boring proof of a life that was functioning exactly as designed. Even my spam folder was clean. Then, one afternoon, my cousin Greg called again. I figured you'd want to know, he said. Your sister took a plea deal. Good for her, I said. She's getting 8 years. Probation after that. I didn't ask about my parents. I already knew. People like them don't change. They just find smaller rooms to echo in. Greg hesitated. You okay? I'm better than okay, I said. I'm finally finished being the quiet one who cleans up. There was a long pause. Then he laughed softly. Marin, you realize you're the last one standing, right? No, I said. I'm the first one who stopped falling. That night, after dinner, I sat on the porch again. Daniel joined me, 2 cups of tea in hand. We watched the sky turn from bruised blue to the kind of dark that doesn't ask for explanation. You ever think about writing it down? He asked. All of it? I just did, I said. He smiled, resting his hand over mine. Then what comes next? Nothing, I said. That's the best part. The wind shifted, soft and clean. Somewhere inside the house, the lights clicked off automatically. I leaned back and let the dark wrap around us, peaceful and final in its quiet. The next morning, I woke before dawn. The sky outside was still the color of slate, the air sharp enough to feel new. I brewed coffee, opened the back door, and let the cold in. For years, I'd measured my life by the noise my family made, by what I was fixing, defending, forgiving. Now there was only the hum of the refrigerator and the steady breath of the man who stayed. I took a long sip of coffee and smiled. Freedom doesn't announce itself. It just sits down beside you one morning, silent as sunrise, and doesn't leave.